Alrighty, it is the worst day of your life as a storyteller. The game has gone horribly, horribly wrong, and your players are upset, you're upset, and it is feeling like the end. What are you to do? What will you do? Those are the questions we're going to cover today as we dive into the end of the game, the tragedy of when things go all fouled up. I'm Jonathan Albin, Game Master Soapbox. Let's get into it.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame. Our strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
Alrighty, it's the end of the world as we know it. Like the old song says, we should feel fine, but we should figure out what we're going to do. And today we're going to look at 10 crazy ways to consider dealing with the challenges of the end of the game. Each one of them I'm going to give the pluses and the minuses I've done in previous videos, but I'm going to also be providing you with the insight that maybe will help you eke out a victory in the face of all of that defeat. Let's go. Alrighty, so of course the first option is you've played the game out the way you wrote it. It went really, really wrong, so maybe just chuck it all. Take it all up, scrap it up and put it in the round file and rewrite it. Well, while this option does at the instant that it goes badly feel like a really good idea, this may not be your best option. By choosing to dump everything you've done, you may actually throw the baby out with the bathwater. So before you go to the point of actually dumping everything, let's look at a few other options before we throw everything away, all right? Let's do that. Okay, of course, the second is a deal's a deal. The dice fell where they may. Let's just start the story again right where we are. Suck it up, Buttercup, and better luck next time. While this does sometimes feel like the best option because you just can't undo what's happened, you can't rewrite the script. Well, the reality is that you as a storyteller certainly can. So let's look again, rather than just shining it and moving on, let's at least consider some of the other options because there may be alternatives that are more useful. Additionally, sucking it up, Buttercup also feels rather harsh, especially when players are involved in their characters' emotional state has to be considered as well because the players may have invested a lot of time. And so we need to really take a look at what the occurrence was. Of course, the third would be to enact a local blame game. You say the players made some bad decisions. They say that you set the conditions too difficult for them to handle. You ask them to consider the variables and to look at the way they entered the story, and pretty soon everybody's pointing fingers at everybody. The idea of enacting a local blame game is not very fruitful and certainly can end up with hard feelings, so I don't recommend this idea. Of course, you could, in many cases game masters will do this, instead of speaking with the players, their personal shame and confusion about the situation leads them to talk to several different other game masters. Perhaps they have talked to the game store's most senior experts. Maybe they've looked online. Maybe they've read some Reddit nightmare posts that all reflect badly on the situation. They've looked for these experts to give them a conclusion. Well, just as the other ideas are bad ideas, this also is problematic because the people who are involved now in the retrospect are not going to be those that were there in the conversation if the people you're looking to are outside of the game. And of course, there are those who are going to turn to the rule book and flip through looking for book, chapter, verse to substantiate their claims about the game and point out the foibles or the errors that the players made, or perhaps to look for deeper things that happened within the mechanics of the game that leverage the situation to make it so untenable, looking for ways to exonerate themselves or at least make themselves feel better. This cross-checking mechanism is really, I guess, akin to talking to rules lawyers or other authorities, but this does not fix the situation, nor does it shed any useful light on the conditions, because as you are the game master, the decisions you made on the field, so to speak, will have to stand in these cases, because the cross-checking won't change the decisions that you made. Of course, this one is a little bit closer to truth. The idea of asking your players simply to replay the session. Maybe there were dynamics interpersonally that were being brought to the fore that were unrecognized. Maybe there was some ego involved that set off a triggered cascade of events that led to the bad situation, the snafu condition, the system normal all fouled up mechanism that had ruined the session. This is one way to resolve the situation. It doesn't clear the baffles as well as some of the others we're going to come to here in a minute, but at least they do provide you with a way to save a little bit of face by reestablishing the facts in the case and letting it play through a second time. That does not, however, mean that you're necessarily going to save it, because if there are episodic problems, if there are mechanical problems already in the process, you are just setting yourself up for a second bite at the apple, and it could be just as sour. On the other hand, you could sit and wring your hands and look back at it week after week after the situation, not necessarily directly trying to resolve it, but instead trying to put it through your processor and try to see what might have made a difference, what could have changed things. And this death analysis, this death spiral, is just akin to the idea of throwing the event away and rewriting. It doesn't necessarily fix anything, and even if you are able to analyze a different outcome or rationalize for yourself why it happened the way it did, does not cause it to have instantaneously go away, and you still have the problem that may have been at the source that hasn't yet been discovered. Of course, there is the game master who is quick on his feet, and instead of trying to revise the situation, looks for clues and evidence within the way it played out, and then retcon a solution, find a way to look at the analysis of how it happened and justify your way through it. While this does work, and I've seen several game masters get away with this, when you have a problem that is endemic between players, or for example a situation where the players are simply not understanding or comprehending what's going on, the creative retcon will sometimes look right past the problems that are there blatantly and simply give a new shine, so to speak, to the polished turd that is the game as it's run so far. So while a retcon may be a possibility, realize that you also need to use some of the other elements that we're going to be talking about in this video. Now, one of the better ways to handle this is to bring your players together in the light of the aftermath of the situation and actually collaboratively examine what exactly happened. Where did the players go wrong? Where did you as a storyteller perhaps overstep the bounds? Where are the places that the game itself had a flaw or a problem that led to the cascade that was the goat rope of the session? So this is getting closer to a solution, because it lets you at least talk through the problems that the game had within it at the time. Now, granted, it's still after the fact, and it may be, as a matter of fact, several weeks after, and so therefore memories may not be as clear and there may actually be additional difficulties that have happened since then. So you'll want to do your collaborative examination as quickly after the event as humanly possible. Of course, there are game masters who get so frustrated, so ego struck, and perhaps so personally wounded that they close up their shop entirely. And I don't recommend it. This is not a useful situation, and it doesn't really solve anything, but it will perhaps prevent it from ever happening again. Now, I don't recommend it. In my parting shots, I'll give you my recommendation on the best way for this all to get handled, but I wanted to point out all the things that might have happened instead. Alrighty, so yes, we had a bad situation. In my case, I've had a game session where the players made all the wrong decisions. They rolled their dice with horrible typical luck. I've had situations where my villains have been spot on and made every die roll and incredibly survived things that should have caused their elimination. But it's a realization that it's only a game. We need to put away the parts, the situations that caused it. Yes, collaborative exploration is probably the best piece to add to this, but to realize that it's only a game, it's only a session, we can move on and start the next section either directly beyond it, or as I've said, perhaps having with a creative redo. Either of these is an option, but what you want to do is realize that games are capricious. The dice can be harsh mistresses, and the way things went can be an end. Now, I'm asking you as well, what kind of things would you have done differently? What would be the steps that you would take to avoid the challenges and difficulties of a snafu moment? They all happen, and in my case, I've talked about this before. I've had exactly 5 TPK situations, and we could analyze each one of them, and I have. Trust me, I've gone over them many times. But if you're going to be looking at those horrible conditions and horrible situations, the first thing you have to do is recognize that in the framework, they are just a situation that happened in the game, and they're neither more positive nor negative than any other given situation. And while they can be analyzed and determine what may have contributed to it, there is no way to take it back, and to play beyond it without resolution, without figuring out what caused the problem, only leads yourself to fall into the same situation again. Alrighty, I want to thank you for being with me for this episode. NycosRPG is a mechanism that allows you to fast play. There'll be a link down below on how to get a hold of it. And I want to thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next episode.